Isn't giving her space going to make us grow further apart? Whether you're separated right now or separated in the same house, maybe you've moved out, or maybe you're doing a nesting separation where you trade being in the home for the kids. Giving her space is always a painful time. It's confusing. She's confused. She can't tell you what she wants, and you want to fix it. You want to ask her, what's going on? What can I do differently? We want to speak about learning how to love and lead with Mojo like a king in your life, not only in your life as a man, but in your relationship, because she wants safety, inspiration, and sexual leadership. And we're here to talk about long-term, monogamous, compassionate relationship together. We want intimacy. We want to grow together. We want a future together. And we'd love for her to want to come back. We'd love for her to want to connect. So isn't giving her space going to make us grow further apart? Let me just start with Cynthia. I've got a post from the forum we'll talk about today as well. And then we'll get into these 3 points: masculine frame, emotional safety, and leadership and intimacy. So first blush, isn't giving her space going to make us grow farther apart?
It's a great question, because I can feel in that there is a very skilled balancing act here. Because if your woman is in such a angry or shut down or hurt place that she's saying she needs space, there's a real hunger there, and there's a voice calling out that she needs something different. On the other hand, if that connection completely leaves, if she completely feels like she's driving the frame of the whole relationship, saying that space must happen and everyone around her does exactly what she says, then she's going to be put into a more masculine frame in itself and lose attraction. So it's such a dynamic process. And underneath that all, what you're really wanting to strum the chords of is evolutionary psychology, in terms of space is good, and also how can she feel the tension of loss, and like, oh, this masculine man in my life is not just going to do what I say, and he can pull his energy in other directions from me.
Well, the reality of what happens if there is no more relationship, if there is no more marriage, what does that mean? And you've spoken about before that she may quite often think that all of the good things will stay from the marriage while she can take space. So talk with us about that.
Yeah, it pains me. I do see this happening a lot, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing or an assumption in femininity, but when you say she assumes that all the good things will stay, she assumes that she still gets to keep the frame of masculinity you've been providing her, or the masculine safety you've been providing her, or helping her manage life. And I think it's a really big shock, and again, an evolutionary pull in her psychology to realize that she doesn't just get that while pushing away different kinds of relationship.
Yeah. So part of the shock is if and when you do start to move on, or if you are separated, if all of a sudden you're not on call, maybe as the husband that you were before, it can cause waves. So speaking of causing waves, let's jump into a post from the forum. Gentlemen, those of you that are here, I honor you for being here, certainly. So if you want to raise your hand, go to the, what's the button again? The reactions button. That's right. The reactions button in Zoom, and raise your hand or post in the chat. I'd love for you to do that. So here's a post from the forum. This is from Mentoring Men, actually. Re-engage physical touch. I'm overthinking physical touch, going off a comment from her about a month ago that she doesn't want to be touched. She's coming back from 2 weeks away, and I'm pondering whether or not to re-engage the touch as a way to invite and lead her out of retraction. I fear being premature in the process, pushing her even further away. I'm okay with the rejection. In the past, she was more of a dead fish with regards to touch than outwardly rejecting. What are your thoughts and experiences on re-engaging touch and leading or offering a way back into intimacy? Let me clarify too. She is a highly sexual person, just decided to retract from me. My thought is that even though she said out loud that touch isn't what she wants, because it may cause her to want more because she's sexual, she would be disappointed in me allowing her to lead, not wanting it myself, not having the balls to pursue anyway. I know she wants sex, she's just in her head. Touch isn't what she wants. She would be disappointed allowing her to lead if he allows her to lead, not wanting it myself and not having the balls to pursue anyway. So Cynthia, how does this come across? She's a highly sexual person, doesn't want touch because it may lead to her being more sexual with me. What's your initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate this man's perspective and really kind of witnessing the pattern that's occurring. When she says that she's afraid that will lead her to wanting more sex with you, that feels like almost a nod to her, a little bit to her femininity of once she's in a powerful frame like yours, once she kind of succumbs and surrenders to being in pleasure in a container that maybe she doesn't quite trust yet. She's afraid that then the emotions of her, the natural inclination to want to be the river in the riverbanks, kind of take over this more logical masculine thought process of I have to keep myself safe. I have to create my own walls because I haven't even trusted myself in what the dynamics have been before.
So the haven't even trusted herself. This is a common theme. By the way, I want to engage with you guys in the chat. So this, I don't trust myself, she may have said, or she doesn't trust you. Who can relate to that? So punch into the chat. Who can relate to her saying, I don't trust myself, or I don't trust you? And this is a reason why she wants space or why she doesn't want to engage in conversation or physical touch. How does this relate to your spot? So she doesn't trust herself. Well, wouldn't that be, that's not such a bad thing, right? I mean, we're married. If she got into the mood and then she wants to be more sexual again, what's wrong with that? I mean, we're husband and wife. Why wouldn't she want that?
Yeah. And I guess that, again, I mean, in relationship, in marriage, of course, that's what we're wanting. What very well-connected masculine and feminine and polarity are wanting together. Right now, there's a story of polarity's gone askew because she's decided she has to be this in a certain way. She has to create her own armor. Otherwise, she doesn't know if, what she wants in relationship with you is going to occur. And there's also a chance too where a woman wants to kind of punish the space of the relationship because it's not the way she's wanted it to go, and so she's veering over here to purposely create space and kind of hold on to a sense of empowerment she has from that. And even though it's a false sense of power, it can give her more of a sense of trust in her own solidity, which again, that's a false sense. So when you turn shoulders away, all of a sudden she realizes what she's been getting out of that negative exchange is no longer there, and something has to shift.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to look at the chat right now. So who has a question about what Cynthia said, or who can relate to what Cynthia is saying? So in the chat, she's told me she just doesn't feel safe yet. She didn't trust me on silly things even. And it's not that she doesn't trust me, but rather she doesn't trust herself to spend a lot of time with me because she'll get drawn back to me. Yeah. She's so chained to the idea of separation that no other option seems to be possible right now. She'll be drawn back to me. So if I'm in this man's spot, which I've been in the past, and she'll be drawn back to me, well, yeah, she also calls me for things. She also wants to have family time. She also is talking about planning a birthday party with the kids coming up. Why is that? So on one hand, she doesn't want to be drawn back to me, but on the other hand, she's talking about doing things together as a family or into the future. What's that about?
Yeah, I think the big picture of that is to see that masculine energy and your presence is so powerful that you do have this sway over feminine that's on a very guttural energetic level. And so in this particular story, I see her trying to be her own masculine. Like, I'm not going to be affected by your energy the way I was before. But then she's still wanting, in that scenario, the gifts of what your masculinity gives, the safety it feels to be in the container of family. Let's say, her tire pops on the edge of the road, like calling you to come rescue her. She still wants those incredible gifts. She's just picking and choosing as if she's at the fruit aisle in the grocery store.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's very, very confusing. The tire story literally happened a few months ago. Yeah. So let's jump into this in a framework that Cynthia and I have not shown on here on the C Note Show. Let's do this right now. So these are the three pillars of getting love back, the Get Love Back framework that Cynthia and I have developed. So the core of the framework is the bottom of the pyramid of masculine frame. Then on top of that is emotional safety. And then after masculine frame and emotional safety comes leadership of intimacy. And these are the three pillars of our work here, our work as a man, our work in wanting to build toward version 2.0 of ourselves and the relationship with our wife or with another woman. We need these skills regardless. And so within masculine frame, let's look at this in context of the question, Cynthia. So around breaking codependence, resetting his own masculine polarity with her and growing a powerful self-worth, grow powerful self-worth. So what he's asking here in this question is, should I re-engage? How can I be in my own frame within this? And do I want to reach out and actually touch her? So part of my question here would be, do you feel like you're going to lose yourself? He said he's not worried about her rejection, but are you going to lose yourself if you don't reach out and touch her? Is there some punishment that you're going to put on yourself if you're not perfect, if you don't feel like you're escalating things, especially right when she got back? And can you connect with her without touch? As we've talked about in the staircase of intimacy, it's emotional intimacy first and then physical intimacy, right? And I'll ask Cynthia about this here in a moment, but emotional safety needs to be built before leading into intimacy. And I would say intimacy is verbal and physical intimacy, certainly. So do the two of you have healthy boundaries? Have you reset the lover dynamics in the relationship? And do you know how to heal and open her? And Cynthia and I teach all of these within our one-on-one coaching and within our group coaching as well. And if you have questions about these, guys, certainly raise your hand or post in the chat. I'd love for you to come in and ask questions. So in this area, do you feel you can connect with her without physical touch? And after she gets back from a trip, so specifically in this scenario, Cynthia, when a woman's away for 2 weeks or even away from her man, if he's traveling, what is that like when she's away traveling and then comes back? What would be this man's consideration in this spot around her frame, around polarity, around her desires to like open herself and surrender to him?
Yeah, that space away and that time away, I do see and I experience myself, the feminine has a tendency to naturally want to get a little bit more protective of her own being, to put her own spear into the world. And so coming back home, or even if this is kind of a reuniting after there's been space, for it to immediately be physical intimacy, for some women that might be too quickly deep into the layers that she's built over that time. And so really the secret key to that is to build some of that emotional intimacy first, so that she can share about her experience, learn how to reopen again. Because I do find that women and the feminine are kind of in this constant open and close, like, the flower out in spring. And it's that dance that if you're willing to play with her with that and gift her with your presence, that does be the underpinning of her trust, that does underpin her desire to reconnect again, even after there's been space.
So I was just away for the long weekend, Friday through Sunday. I was in North Carolina, flew into Charlotte, and then we drove the 2 hours out near Asheville to the Black Mountains there. And I was there with 10 other guys, many of whom you know from the community. We had a fantastic time. And I do men's trips a couple of times a year. And we've talked about this before, and let's talk about this now. So what is it like when I'm away? What's your personal experience with frame and openness? And right, so we're not in a bad relationship spot right now, right? We're not separated. So even in a good spot, what is that like for you as a woman?
Oh yeah, I mean, and I think this is why women over time can build resentment and then end up wanting to push you away, is that even when in small increments of time, when this this warrior presence is gone from her life, when she kind of has to be her own warrior, the heightened senses of being aware of what noises are going on, what neighboring tribes are going on. That is just a very natural her of buffing up. Okay, I have to be in this place right now. And so reminding the feminine when that warrior's back, whether it's after a weekend away or you've had 3 months of separation, reminding her that it's okay again to soften. That's a skill that she can absolutely learn, and may never be perfect with.
Yeah. Well, that's an idea. And I don't think we as men realize how unbalancing that can be and the different ways she needs to be. And maybe for years, this woman in the story has felt alone or felt betrayed in a certain way, or, we don't know the backstory to keep this post anonymous, but now she's been away for 2 weeks. Yeah. So if we look back at this Get Love Back framework that Cynthia and I created, so to get all the way up to the top, again, we have to build masculine frame within ourselves, which means breaking codependence, resetting polarity, growing a powerful sense of self-worth within our own selves. As I call it, turning your shoulders toward the world and being inspired within your chest and your daily mission, right? Checking boxes and feeling like you're throwing the spear and killing the buffalo in the world. And also how to have the skill and frame when you're in presence with a woman. Then emotional safety for both of you. Then we're on to leadership of intimacy. So cultivating natural attraction, leveraging evolutionary psychology, like you said, and inviting her into version 2.0. So if this man were in front of us, and again, it's an anonymous post, I'm keeping it anonymous, what might you say? What could be some indicators? How would you want to feel if you were that woman when you just saw him? So separation, let's assume there's separation happening, right? It's why this man is posting. It's why he's here within the groups. She's been gone for 2 weeks. So how would you feel, not knowing much about her, but how would you feel if he came up right up and hugged her after she's been saying, no, I don't want touch? How would you feel if he, reached out to try to take her hand or something more just physical out of the chute?
Yeah. And even hearing that, I feel a great amount of grief of the loss of that, because I can feel how in that situation, a woman, that would feel like a very big energy input into her territory as she's created. And the grief is knowing that it's coming from this wise, loving, masculine presence. But I think the story behind the story is your energy is so powerful that even the smallest hug or the touching of the hand can be abrupt to the energy she's cultivated during that time away, or those periods of months away. And so the kind of softer layer by layer approach is a way to really, again, invite that feminine to start opening. The abrupt, as small as it may seem, can do a lot in terms of her collapse, and then creating more of a story about why she needs space.
So that helps with an understanding of her point of view. And I'll say, and Chris, thanks for raising your hand. I'll call on you in 1 second. I'll say, when you're in a spot that's painful like this, like separation, you want to be juggling 2 feelings, 2 energies, 2 points of view. One is the real sadness of what's happening. The other is, and you're excited and inspired for the future. So he may be sad. When he shows up, he's picking her up for the airport, or they're on the ride home, or they just get home. He can realize and appreciate the sadness of that moment and be inspired for this new chapter of life that he's leaning into, this new masculine frame, and building emotional safety with her and having perspective and how to lead in the staircase of intimacy. So it's not just he's dejected and the nice guy, or he's upset and angry. He can feel sadness, breathe through that, and be inspired for the future. Yeah. Chris, come on in, please.
Yeah. What if not me, but what if you were to ask for permission in a very not boyish energy, but just an apology, say I've missed you. I really want to give you a hug, and wait for a response. Would that be something you would step into in that space, or is that still too much pushing against somebody's wanting space?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I'm curious. What are you thinking? What's the thought process behind that, or what's the desire behind that? Just to see if she'll come to you?
No, just because you missed her and it's just like you haven't seen your grandpa in fucking 6 months. You give him a hug. I mean, it's that energy there of just like, hey, I haven't seen you, and with no kind of, nothing behind it other than I missed you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So thanks, Chris. What's your initial response to that? I love don't tell her that she feels like your grandpa, maybe. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's just,
Yeah, I know.
what I
So
mean.
what's your initial thoughts there?
I mean, that makes so much sense. And what really hit me was sex and sexuality creates such a different kind of terrain in the space between people, or at least I feel that for the feminine, their whole wiring of how they're going to react to someone based on whether that has been that kind of physical intimacy just makes it a totally different map than other types of family members. And we also know in this work that if things just stay solid and icy, and there's she never gets to feel more of a frame or a movement from you toward her, then she kind of also gets to stay in her own story of what she wants. But I would say there's like a different kind of nuance.
Yeah. And to add on to that, the nuance is if she's told you she doesn't want you to touch her, then she's probably going to shame you for any kind of suggestion around the touch, which this man's fine with. He's comfortable with that. So, Cynthia said, don't just go in to touch her, especially since she specifically asked. Now, that question, and also the question in the chat here, I think a good start should be asking, would you be okay if I give you a hug? I think if the person just hugs her without asking, could be seen as not respecting her boundaries. Yeah, exactly. See, would you be okay if I give you a hug? So my initial thoughts here are back to this masculine frame, okay, and leadership and intimacy, but more on masculine frame. Right? How does it? Let's play this out. So assume you're her for a moment, as best you can from what we know of the situation. And regarding frame, so let's say the first example is, hey, I missed you. Can I give you a hug like you're my grandfather? Hey, I missed you. Can I give you a hug? And the second would be, hey, I missed you. Come over here and give me a hug. I'm curious how those hit you in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a second one, she could still, refuse and turn away. And however, the first example, if it felt like there was a limpness, I was almost, there was no like polarity. And I could see her turning that into more lack of attraction, or getting almost kind of more confuddled in her own feminine emotion, versus the second one, there is an ask in it, but it's more directive, and she can always turn away, but it feels like there's an energy portal for her to move through towards you, versus the first one, which is kind of like a friend or a brother, or it even felt like the masculine in that situation was making itself lower than her, and losing his own frame, his own power, his own self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah. I certainly respect, Chris and in the chat as well. The second one sounds more like a demand. So making a statement is an inferred question, right? And demand is come over here and give me a hug or else. Right. I mean, I also could have said the first one, instead of, hey, I missed you. Can I have a hug? I could have said, I missed you. Is it okay, pretty please, if I have a hug? I mean, there's a spectrum here of how you say things. Right? My point, though, with the frame is instead of asking the question, to make a statement. Hey, come over here and give me a hug. And she doesn't need to do that. Let's say if I met a woman in a bar, and later in that evening, at a bar or on the trail running or kayaking or where the hell ever you meet a woman, right? And later in that evening, you say, hey, now this may not be politically correct, and this is debatable, certainly. Okay. So take it with a grain of salt. Don't be a jackass, right? But you could say, hey, would it be okay if I kissed you? Versus come over here and give me a kiss. So traditionally, and considering Cynthia and I teach polarity, and Cynthia and I teach about evolutionary psychology and the instinctual reactions that these frames have, that polarity has. What's the difference there? Or, hey, would it be okay if you give me a shoulder rub? You ask your wife, versus, hey, later on tonight, I would love a shoulder rub. What's the difference in those?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally hear what you're saying. Like, that sounds like more of a demand. I think it does get down to this. It does feel like a hierarchy of energy. And when the request is coming as if the masculine's not quite sure if it's okay to ask, or he's kind of waiting for her permission, it's a very different feeling versus the, here, I'm providing vision, I'm providing action, and she might not go for that vision and action, but that solidity of who you are as a man, and your worth and your power and your ability to lead is uncompromised.
It's uncompromised. Well, look, guys, I'm under no delusion that saying it in a different way is going to like magically, and have her jump in your arms and like lower her shirt so you can see the top of her. No, like, I'm not under any delusion, but the point here is that we want to keep our frame on a practice frame, and she's going to test us. This man wants to see if he can re-attract her. This man wants to see if he can get love back with his woman. He wants to see if he can, how did he put it? Let's look again. The exact word that he used, re-engage. He wants to re-engage because she's retracted from him, right? And she'd be disappointed if he allowed her to lead, if he didn't want it, or if he didn't even have the balls anyway. Okay, so having the fucking balls to ask is the first thing. Having the balls to ask her out, or tell her to kiss you, or go for the kiss on the first date, that's one thing. Here, I'm not saying, and another man put, I would just hug her. Well, she specifically asked you not to hug her, so that's debatable. But here, he wants to see if he can re-engage her. And I'll reframe again. The masculine frame is for you first. For you first, to grow your own sense of self-worth. Then emotional safety needs to be built, and then intimacy can be grown. So physical touch after she's asked not to, after she's been gone for 2 weeks, probably not the next step up the staircase of intimacy. I'd say most likely not. I wouldn't go for the hug right away. You can say, hey, it's great to see you. The kids and I missed you. Come over here and give me a hug. And at least that way that feels safe. You're honoring her. The kids and I missed you. Hey, come give me a hug. Now, if she's, I told you I don't want you to touch me, like, it could go really badly. And you as a man can't be pushed on your back. We teach this in our coaching and you can't be pushed on your back like, oh, I'm so sorry, or blown away. Like, oh, I'm such a bad person for asking her. Okay, so don't be blown on your back, and also don't be pulled on your face. So if she does give you a hug, you're not thinking, oh, goody, everything is fixed. Like, yay, I scored points. Like, I did it right. That's not how this is. This is, what kind of man do you want to be? Are you practicing frame, safety, and leadership? So in the chat, I think what's most important is to detach from the outcome and expectations. Exactly. Maybe you go in for the hug and she turns away. Are you going to be butthurt about it, or you brush it off, let it slide with the witty comment? Yeah, I mean, again, personally, and what I would teach this man if we were in a coaching call, I wouldn't just go for the hug. She's told you not to touch her. Okay. And then it's really hard. Like, I don't know about you. If you're like stone cold and you're in the middle of the airport, you're like by baggage claim, like, hey, it's good to see you. And you go for a hug and you get denied in the airport. She like turns away, or I told you not to touch me, like, oh shit. Like, all of a sudden it's going to be real hard to have a James Bond witty comment in that moment. That doesn't look too good. That's pretty rough. So that's me personally. But if you're like, hey, come here and give me a hug. A lot of this is I walk toward her and I stop a certain distance away. And then I ask her, I invite her, I suggest that she come the rest of the way to me. Right? You guys have heard the whole, like, when you go in for a kiss, you go in like 90% of the way and you let her come the last 10% of the way. Yeah. Get her to come to you. Like, this is what we're talking about. Leadership doesn't mean you just go for it all the time. Yeah, it's how can you, okay. So we've got about 9 minutes left in our call. Who has a question? Come on in. It does not have to be about this. We're here to serve you guys. What questions do you have about the Get Love Back framework or this situation? Or do you have something different that you'd love to bring up? Especially here with Cynthia here on the CNO show. Please unmute yourself. Come on in.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, Jamil, go for it.
A lot of my issues tend to revolve around our daughter. So often often, I'll kind of think, how do I lead a masculine frame without me constantly feeling like I'm correcting her or giving her advice? And she already thinks that I think I'm a better parent, so she already has that.
Well,
in
we
her
know
mind.
that's true. So let's just move on from that. No, okay. So
And
correcting
then,
her and giving her advice.
and then this weekend, my daughter was like, my daughter's 6. She was like, oh, mommy sometimes asks me when she's drinking if I want a sip of her, alcoholic drink. And then she said, don't tell daddy. And I'm like,
Okay. All right.
and I'm like, do I bring it up? Or am I just going to sound like her father giving her a lecture? So I kind of find that kind of
Okay.
dynamic hard.
Yeah, that's a great question. The caveat in any of this, there's exceptions to any rule. And to me, the exception is there a safety concern? Okay. So if I'm you, and you have to decide this, if I'm you, would I consider, if my little girl is telling me that her mommy is giving her alcohol, would I consider that a safety concern? And if I consider it a safety concern, then there's no question. Now, I wouldn't bring it up in front of your daughter, but there's no question, we're beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. We're beyond this just being something that, you're bothered by, or nice guy tendencies, or you're maybe feeling like you need to control or correct. I mean, I've co-parented, well, I'll loosely say co-parented my son. I'll loosely say co-parented my son. If you heard that story, I can tell that story another time. But I've co-parented for 8 years, but really it's been when my son is over with Cynthia and me, we've been parenting, and then he goes over there to his mom's, and I have no idea really what goes on over there, because she didn't want to co-parent with me, his mom, my son's mom, right? I wanted to, she wanted nothing to do with that. So when he goes over there, right now, when he was 12 years old, said, mommy lets me have sips of alcohol, I would have brought it up. I would have said, when our son wasn't there, I would have said, hey, he told me something and I want to ask you your perspective. Don't just assume that the kid's telling the truth necessarily, right? It might have been a virgin daiquiri for all you. I mean, I don't know, right? It could have been, who knows? But curiosity is the way to ask. Like, hey, I'm curious. He said that, my son said that he was sipping off of an alcoholic drink, and I'm not sure what to think, but that's what he told me. So, and then you just deal with whatever comes after that, meaning, if you bring something up that's a safety concern and she throws it in your face or she has a problem with it, you just deal with it and we could talk about that specifically if you like, but you deal with that then you're bringing it up, right? If it's you don't like that she's wearing, purple shoes, well, that's really not a boundary issue. That's not a matter of safety. So if you're trying to correct your daughter's mom over the color, that's starting to become controlling. Yeah. So has she told you, don't be my father, don't try to correct me,
No, but just no, she hasn't. But it's just, I'm always the one, she's never really correcting me on parenting, and I'm always the one saying things to her about certain aspects. I'm the one who reads parenting books, who's done parenting courses and so on, and she does. I've invited her to do them, but she's just not that interested. So.
Yeah. Well, Cynthia and I have done the Gottman marriage training as well, both levels of the Gottman marriage training. And within that, they talk about compliments versus positive comments versus negative comments. And now that's technically in a relationship, but you want to have at least 7-to-1 positive to negative. So I worked with this in the school system as well with children for years. So you don't want to bring up negative things too often with any relationship with any human, right? If all you're doing is bring up negativity, they feel like you're harping on them, correcting them. So this is also a practice of praise. How often are you finding a reason to praise her mom, right? So how often are you balancing this? And when there's a stack of issues, this is completely arbitrary what I'm about to say, but I generally pick one thing per month. Like if I have a concern on something, I mean, unless it's a safety issue, okay, safety issue is you just deal with it no matter what. Yeah. But if there's one thing like a serious parenting issue, your child's staying up late, she's playing a ton of video games or something, not doing homework, like this kind of thing. Personally, and this is my opinion and arbitrary, I wouldn't bring up more than one concern per month, just going to sound, to me, it sounds like harping. That's my personal experience.
But what about if you have a disagreement? Don't you want to revisit that when you're both calm and talk it over, or not really?
Well, how do you mean? Tell us the scenario.
Oh, just like I didn't take my daughter to ballet class because I was going to take her to London to see some like winter lights. And she was like going on about how she's missing ballet and stuff. But when my wife wants to skip ballet, I don't make a big deal about it. So it's like we had a disagreement. She had a go at me, and I just said, this is, this is important. So, and then we left it at that, and we haven't redressed it. We haven't addressed it again in a calm manner. We just like let it lie.
Okay. What makes you feel like you need to bring it up again?
I don't know, just to get some understanding, really. If it happens again, that I don't want to have the same old conversation.
Sure. That reminds me of one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my entire life as an adult man, which was to think that other people have the same set of values that I do, and to think that other people should have the same set of values as I do. And that causes me to judge. It caused me to correct. And when we judge other people, really, we're eroding our own sense of self-worth. We're really judging our own self and often projecting that on others. Like, for instance, in your example, I might think one of my values is to be a great father. And so if your wife is saying something and it hits that core of you that, oh, this person thinks I'm not being a great father, I feel like I need to defend myself or explain, or they need to understand. And really what I've discovered, and it took me years, Jamil, to understand this, is I'm trying to put my set of values onto them. So she doesn't need to understand. You told her what you told her what your values were. Like, this is important. I'm taking her to London, taking her to the light to see lights. That's it. I don't think it needs to be addressed again.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Cynthia, what would you add in our final few seconds here about what Jamil is saying here?
Yeah, Jamil, that's such an incredible question. And I love that C said in the chat, he's like, take her to a ballet show in London.
Yeah.
What hits me in that is, I mean, I know so much of this work is, and I so appreciate men coming to this here, wanting to understand what the feminine's going through and what her experience is. It's so deeply appreciated. And if I could just reiterate, you are so powerful in your masculinity. I mean, women are having to falsely create boundaries just so they're not affected by you or not pulled towards you. And your ability to use that power and self-knowing for the good of your child or wherever you're leading your life, there's nothing lost in that. And she, whether she's in relationship with you or not, may throw a temper tantrum about that, may get upset, may be angry. And that's not an indication that where you've been leading is wrong. It's actually an indication of showing how her femininity is affected by you. And I want to just say that, because then that's like, the power is in your hands to use it however you choose, and whomever you want to protect with that, and whomever you want to lead.
Jamil, thank you. Fantastic times. Yeah.
Thank you. Very inspiring.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we'll see you the same time next week. If you want to know more about our Get Love Back framework, reach out to us. And if you haven't seen our 45-minute audiobook, greatmenmovemountains.com/free audiobook, and greatmenmovemountains.com/Facebook is our private Facebook group just for men. Love seeing you guys here.